King Solomon, celebrated as the wisest man to ever walk the earth, was blessed by God with extraordinary insight, astounding wealth, and unmatched authority. Yet, behind the brilliance of his reign lies a sobering truth. The same king who rose to unimaginable heights eventually descended into spiritual decline, regret, and heartbreak. How could a man so specially chosen, guided, and empowered by God drift so far from the very source of his greatness? How did the king who built a golden kingdom, a sacred temple, and a legacy of wisdom end his life in sorrow and emptiness? Today, we journey through the rise and fall of King Solomon, a story filled with divine favor, breathtaking achievements, painful compromise, and the deep consequences of turning away from God. You'll discover how a ruler with everything ended up declaring that life itself felt meaningless, and what his path teaches us about pride, temptation, and the dangers that silently pull a heart off course. If Solomon's journey challenges or inspires you, remember to like this video, subscribe, and activate the notification bell so you never miss another powerful biblical story. And be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Solomon's journey speaks most to you? Share this with a friend or family member who needs these timeless lessons. Now, let's step into the dramatic rise and tragic fall of Israel's wisest king and uncover the truth that still speaks to every one of us today. Solomon's journey to the throne did not begin with power, but with divine choice. As the son of King David and Bathsheba, he was handpicked by God himself to become Israel's next ruler. And when Solomon finally took the crown, he carried a humble heart, a heart that genuinely desired to lead God's people with integrity. One night, something miraculous happened. In Gibeon, as Solomon slept, the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Imagine that. God offering a blank check. No limits, no restrictions. Anything Solomon desired was within reach. But instead of asking for riches, power, or victory over his enemies, Solomon made a request that revealed the purity of his young heart. He said, "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil." God was deeply pleased, so pleased that he granted Solomon far more than he asked for. Solomon received wisdom beyond human comprehension, wealth no king could rival, honor that spread across nations, a kingdom firmly established by God himself. The rise of Solomon had begun, rooted in humility, fueled by God's favor, and destined for greatness. With God's gift of supernatural wisdom, Solomon's reign quickly transformed into something the world had never seen before. His understanding, judgment, and insight were so profound that people stood in awe wherever he spoke, ruled, or resolved disputes. His wisdom was not ordinary, it was divine. One of the earliest displays of this wisdom became legendary, the case of the two women claiming the same baby. With a single test, Solomon revealed the true mother, leaving the entire nation stunned at the brilliance God had placed within him. But this was only the beginning. According to Scripture, Solomon's wisdom surpassed that of all the wise men of the East and of Egypt, regions known for science, philosophy, and ancient knowledge. He wrote 3,000 proverbs and composed 1,005 songs, covering topics from human behavior to the mysteries of creation. His fame traveled across continents. Nations sent ambassadors. Kings sought his counsel. Trade routes opened because of the influence of his name. Even the powerful Queen of Sheba journeyed with a massive entourage to test Solomon with difficult questions. But when she witnessed his palace, his court, his servants, and the astonishing answers from his mouth, she confessed, "The half was not told to me." Solomon became the most renowned king of his time, wealthy, honored, and extraordinarily wise. Under his leadership, Israel reached its golden age, flourishing in prosperity, peace, and global respect. This was the peak of Solomon's glory, a height few rulers in history have ever reached. At the height of his reign, Solomon undertook the greatest project of his life, the building of the temple of the Lord. This was no ordinary structure. It was the fulfillment of a divine promise, the sacred place where God's presence would dwell among his people. For 7 years, tens of thousands of workers labored with precision. Cedar wood from Lebanon, gold overlay on walls, floors, and furnishings, bronze works shining like fire in the sun. Every detail reflected excellence worthy of the Almighty. And when the temple was finally completed, something extraordinary happened. As Solomon prayed during the dedication, the glory of the Lord filled the temple like a thick cloud. So powerful was God's presence that the priests couldn't even stand to minister. It was a moment when heaven touched earth, when Israel knew beyond question that God was with them. But Solomon's achievements didn't end there. He constructed palaces, fortified cities, fleets of ships and trading networks that made Israel a center of global commerce. Wealth poured in from every direction. Silver became as common as stones. Kings and rulers brought gifts simply to hear Solomon speak. Israel had never seen such peace, such prosperity, such prominence. The kingdom was golden. The future looked unshakable, and Solomon stood at the very top of the world. But it's often at the height of success that the seeds of downfall quietly begin to grow. Despite his unmatched wisdom and the glory of his reign, Solomon's heart began to drift. The same alliances that strengthened his kingdom politically began to corrupt him spiritually. He took hundreds of wives and concubines from foreign nations. 700 wives and 300 concubines, the Bible tells us. These marriages were not just political, they were spiritual traps. Many of his wives worshipped foreign gods, gods of fertility, power, and temptation, and slowly Solomon's devotion to the Lord began to waver. He allowed the high places of idol worship to be built. Altars rose for Astarte, Molech, and Chemosh, deities that directly opposed God's commandments. What was once a heart wholly devoted to the Creator became divided, torn between God and the allure of worldly influence and sensual pleasures.
It's a tragic irony. The very wisdom God had given him to discern right from wrong was overshadowed by his own compromises. Solomon, the wisest man alive, allowed pride, desire, and influence to lead him away from the God who had blessed him with everything. God's warnings were clear. Twice he appeared to Solomon, reminding him of his covenant and the consequences of turning away. But Solomon's heart hardened. He continued to indulge in worldly pleasures, ignoring the spiritual cost. This was the beginning of the fall. The glory of Israel would not last, and the king himself would face the bitter fruit of his choices.
God's response to Solomon's turning away was firm but measured. Because of Solomon's unfaithfulness, God declared that the kingdom would be torn apart. However, out of mercy for David, Solomon's father, the judgment would not take effect during Solomon's lifetime. Instead, it would fall upon his son, Rehoboam. The prophet Ahijah dramatically illustrated this prophecy. He met Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials, outside Jerusalem. Ahijah took a new cloak, tore it into 12 pieces, and handed 10 to Jeroboam, saying, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes." This moment marked the beginning of the end. The United Kingdom of Israel, once strong and united, was set on a course toward division and conflict. Solomon's wisdom, wealth, and achievements could not prevent the consequences of his choices. The lesson is profound. No matter how great your gifts or achievements, a heart that turns away from God invites consequences that even wisdom cannot avert. In the twilight of his life, King Solomon sat in his grand palace, surrounded by the splendor he had amassed. Palaces, vineyards, treasures, fleets, and servants. Yet, In the quiet of his final days, he faced a profound emptiness. All the wealth, power, and wisdom that at once defined him now seemed hollow. These reflections are captured in the book of Ecclesiastes, often attributed to Solomon in his later years. He writes, "Meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." Ecclesiastes 1:2. Even the most extraordinary accomplishments, the temple he built, the wisdom that amazed nations, the alliances he formed, and the wealth he accumulated, felt like a fleeting chase after the wind, empty without God at the center of his life. Solomon realized that pleasure, power, and riches alone cannot satisfy the human heart. He indulged in everything his eyes desired and denied himself nothing, yet all these pursuits brought no lasting fulfillment. Through these sobering reflections, Solomon shares a timeless truth. True purpose and satisfaction are found only in devotion to God. His final words in Ecclesiastes 12:13 summarize this wisdom. "Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind." The rise of Solomon shows the blessings of wisdom and favor, but his fall is a stark reminder that even the greatest can stumble if their heart strays.
As Solomon approached the end of his journey, his life stood as a monumental contrast, the brilliance of divine favor on one side and the tragedy of spiritual drift on the other. His story became more than a historical record. It became a mirror held up to every generation. Solomon's legacy teaches us that great wisdom does not guarantee a faithful heart. Solomon was given unparalleled wisdom, yet even he, the wisest man of his age, strayed. This reminds us that knowledge without obedience leads to downfall. Guarding the heart is more important than having a brilliant mind. Compromise never starts big. It begins in small steps. Solomon didn't fall in one moment. His descent began quietly. A marriage here, a political alliance there, a shrine built just to keep the peace. Little by little, his devotion weakened. His story became more than a historical record. It became a mirror held up to every generation. Solomon's legacy teaches us that great wisdom does not guarantee a faithful heart. Solomon was given unparalleled wisdom, yet even he, the wisest man of his age, strayed. This reminds us that knowledge without obedience leads to downfall. Guarding the heart is more important than having a brilliant mind. Compromise never starts big. It begins in small steps. Solomon didn't fall in one moment. His descent began quietly. A marriage here, a political alliance there, a shrine built just to keep the peace. Little by little, his devotion weakened. His story warns us that small compromises eventually reshape the entire direction of our lives. God's warnings are acts of mercy, not restriction. God appeared to Solomon twice, directly. He reminded him of the covenant, warned him of the dangers, and pleaded for his heart. Solomon's fall was not due to a lack of instruction. It was due to ignoring God's voice. God still warns us today, through scripture, conscience, counsel, and circumstances. Listening is life-saving. Earthly success is empty without spiritual foundation. Solomon had everything: wealth, fame, influence, peace, achievements. But at the end, all he could say was, "Everything is meaningless." His pain came not from failure, but from succeeding in the wrong things. A good start does not guarantee a good finish. Solomon began with humility, worship, and devotion. He ended with regret. His life reminds us that what matters most is not how you start, but how you finish. The final verdict: Fear God and keep His commandments. Solomon's last recorded words form the ultimate lesson of his entire journey. Fear God and keep His commandments. After exploring every path, pleasure, wealth, wisdom, work, and influence, Solomon concluded that only walking with God gives life meaning. His story is not just about a king. It is about the human heart, my heart, your heart, and the simple truth that without God, even the greatest life becomes empty.